truth amnesty, which is that people come up and tell the truth and bring all of these technologies and things into the public domain, all of the exotic technologies into the public domain in return for amnesty, and then we all move along. And suddenly, I had just come from speaking the weekend before up at the 9/11 conference in New York, where I think I met you, Sophia, and suddenly this fellow who would have been the archdemon, my college classmate, John Ashcroft, and I sat down and had a very civilized conversation because we came out of polarities into a spirit of truth and reconciliation. And I think that is where the future of all of this lies. And because it's something like physics, that you can be a particle and a wave at the same time. And let me describe what I'm talking about here. Ben Rich, who was the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works for many years, said that the reason why all of these exotic technologies like HAARP are locked up in the private world is that there is an international board of directors, what I call the International War Crimes Racketeering Organization. There's an international board of directors that can set up numerous front companies like the Carlyle Group, SAIC, that can perform specific functions, such that this international board of directors really kind of runs the world and sets up mega events like 9/11. And then these are carried out through all sorts of cutout companies, and and researchers after the fact try to build up, understand how all the companies work and stuff. But these things are planned over generations. And there's a good case to be made, and I've been working with whistleblowers, and we'll be coming out with a project in 2005 to 2009, which I can't talk about too much right now, which will roll out a lot of this. And part of it will show that, in fact, 9/11 was planned going back to the early 70s, if not before. The World Trade Center towers were probably built already with 9/11 in plan. One was called, in mind, one was called, one tower was called David, and the other was called Nelson, around the Rockefeller brothers. Now, I grew up around these guys. Dick Cheney, who was the chief operations officer of 9/11, he was the year ahead of me at Yale. He flunked out as a sophomore. George W. Bush was a couple of years behind me. I used to go up to Maine, right to David Rockefeller's estate. And I was inside on the Rockefeller operations. And this inside board operates from an upper theater masonry, such that they would be developing through this kind of inside board of directors, using their front companies like SSAIC, like the Livermore Labs, to develop the technologies like HAARP that would knock down their twin towers that they built in order to be knocked down. And this is just part of the scenery. So that one has to get inside the head of the ruling elite to really understand how they function. And then it becomes, if one looks at the psyops through this sort of moralistic mind of a kind of a middle-class constitutionalist, well, that's a Maya level, or through a that is, if one puts on the mind of a perverse Zionist, well, then it becomes easier to understand how they operate. They operate over generations through a board of director type things, using cutout companies that develop technologies essentially for psyops. We live in a psyops world. All world are psyops. Now, my big question when we approach this program, and I truly asked myself last night, because I became active in this field as a public interest counterintelligence officer on November 22nd, 1963. And I was a member of the board of directors of the Assassination Information Bureau. And I was activated by the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And we cared as much, because that was my kind of first thing, as most of the 9/11 activists do. And at some point, that one just kind of rolled over. And so I said to myself last night, well, does 9/11 really matter anymore? Because now with the Obama administration, they're starting to roll over 9/11. You can tell the CIA has been leaking over the past couple of days. Oh, well, Osama bin Laden is alone, and he's on the run in Afghanistan, and he's really haggard, and Obama's after him now. So I said, they're rolling up the scenario. Osama bin Laden, who was the villain or the patsy of 9/11, which Bush used for his term, they're rolling him up now, and they're rolling 9/11 up now. So 9/11, like the John F. Kennedy assassination, is going into the field of historical anachronism. And we're on to the next thing. The next thing now is missile defense. They're going to bring up missile defense in Poland, and that's where the new hot stuff is, because now Medvedev has threatened to put missiles all around the Polish border if Obama goes ahead with the missile defense in Poland, and that's World War III, which is much bigger stakes than Afghanistan. So it's all part of psyops, which is what war is all about. So what I wanted to bring up in this discussion, as we discuss 9/11, and we try to figure out, was the mechanism HARP or not, or this, that, or the other thing, I'm fairly convinced that it was HARP, because HARP was a central part of all psyops. It's used for earthquakes. It's kind of like, it's good for what ails you if you're in the psyops business. 9/11 was the major psyops of the Bush era. It was in the planning. We have eyewitnesses that placed Donald Rumsfeld planning 9/11 as early as 1971, and the Twin Towers being built to the specifications of the psyops, most probably. I know the nephew of Max Abramovich, who's the architect of the Twin Towers, got that contract from the, it was a total, the Twin Towers themselves were designed for 9/11. But now, as realists, as we look at this, we have to take the larger view, because I see the Kennedy assassination was what really kicked off this kind of major Zionist push for world domination. 9/11 was, this kind of push toward the end game. And now they're about to fold down 9/11 when Obama comes in. And Obama's about World War III and Megadeth. As 9/11 scholars and researchers, I think that it's like I have a profound sense of deja vu of being in the same position as Kennedy assassination researchers in 1978. And that was when we had fought for so many years, so many assassination researchers being killed and knocked off, and, COINTELPRO'd. And we finally got the House Select Committee on Assassinations. I worked with Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez on that. and then that was compromised by the intelligence agencies, and after that it just became an historical anachronism. And now I think on this program, as far as I'm concerned, the historical truth of 9/11 has been found. We know pretty much who did it. I think that Leuren Moret has set a good context on it. We know the technology of it going back to 1971, who the major parties were. We'll have all of those details out over the next several months. HAARP was probably the central technology on it. All of this is going to be wrapped up. They're pulling the rug out on Osama bin Laden if he's still alive, but they're putting 9/11 into a dead letter, and it's moving on because George W. Bush and Richard B. Cheney are moving out of office. They're going to be protected. It's going to be impossible to prosecute them from a world point of view, and I think we should spend the next 5 minutes really assessing what does 9/11 mean, and
all right, well,
how should we focus our attention.
We will be back with that. You're listening to Expansion on republicbroadcasting.org, the RBN network. This is Sophia, your host, and we are going to close. We have exactly 5 minutes, Alfred, for you to take to outline. Actually, I don't even, it's something about 9/11. I think you were cut off by the break. Does it really matter anymore? Yes.
Well, no, I just really invite people to step back now that the two principal officers who are legally responsible of treason, George W. Bush and Richard B. Cheney, are going to be exiting without being charged. I mean, that's a major constitutional disgrace, and they're going to be exiting. And in essence, the book is being closed on 9/11 as a functional matter. I mean, from now on, it's going to be an academic issue because neither Bush nor Cheney are going to be prosecuted for treason, and they aren't going to be prosecuted for war crimes, as far as I can see. So is 9/11 going to be just this historical issue? It's a minor industry where people can, go to conferences and make books and, sell videos and, do that. It's kind of an awareness factor, like the Kennedy assassination was, and it's a major feature.
But 9/11 isn't isolated. It's connected to everything that's going on now.
Yes.
So
yes, right.
We cannot allow it to be isolated and closed up and put to bed.
Right. So what I'm saying is that energy of the 9/11 movement now has to be reframed as we enter a new era, because Bush and Cheney, who are the two architects or the two officers who should have been charged with treason, are going by without culpability. The permanent board of directors remains. They're moving to shut down any culpability for it and to bury it as much as possible. And so now I think that we're in an era of reframing it. And so that's why I think it's necessary to really highlight it in terms of HAARP, in terms of the space-based weapon of mass destruction, and really focus on HAARP and on banning HAARP as the principal weapon of the conspiracy. Because as long as HAARP continues, they'll have the human mind they can